Billionaire CEO, thought it was just another gala until a woman arrived with his secret son. The ballroom shimmered with diamonds and champagne. But Elena only saw one man, the one who left 5 winters ago, and the little boy upstairs, fast asleep, who carried his smile. She never thought they'd meet again, never planned for their son to run straight into his arms and call him daddy. Julian froze. The room went silent, and in that moment, everything he thought he knew about his life unraveled. 5 winters without him. The wind whispered through the mountains that night. Snow clung to the pine branches like memory. And inside the ballroom of the Belridge Grand, everything sparkled: dresses, diamonds, reputations. Elena Carter balanced a tray of champagne flutes with one hand and tugged her uniform blazer tighter with the other. Her fingers were raw from working double shifts all week. But that wasn't why they trembled. It was him, Julian West. 5 years, 5 winters since he vanished into his ambition. 5 birthdays, 5 scraped knees, 5 whispered goodnights to a little boy he never knew existed. And now he was here. She'd seen him before the rest did, standing beneath the crystal chandelier, perfectly tailored tux, that familiar tilt of his jaw when he was being admired. He hadn't changed, except maybe his eyes. They were sharper, like he'd learned to live without softness. Elena turned quickly before he could see her. She didn't know what terrified her more, that he might recognize her, or that he might not. In the staff break room just upstairs, her son Eli was tucked under a fleece blanket, cheeks rosy from hot chocolate, sleeping soundly in the care of her best friend Lisa. He had no idea his father was downstairs, 30 feet and 5 years away. Back in the ballroom, Elena wove through crowds of donors and investors. She'd memorized the floor plan, the timing, the social hierarchy. She just hadn't planned for this. Her heart beat so loud she couldn't hear the music anymore. "You okay?" asked Matteo, the head pastry chef, as he passed her. She nodded too quickly. Just tired, but she wasn't. She was unraveling, because there he was, Julian West, the man she'd once trusted with everything, and the father of the boy who carried his eyes. She told herself, avoid him, just make it through the night. But fate has never been good at following orders. She thought he'd forgotten her. She prayed he'd never find out. But that winter, the truth had its own timing. Chapter 1. The Man Beneath the Lights. The first time she saw him again, it was from behind a tray of champagne glasses. Julian West, standing beneath a halo of chandelier light, dressed in black, polished down to the smallest cufflink. Laughter circled around him like perfume. He looked exactly as he did 5 winters ago, only colder now, sharper, like success had carved the softness from his face. Elena froze mid-step. The glass nearest her thumb trembled. She lowered her eyes before his could meet hers. Not out of shame, not exactly, more like survival. She'd spent 5 years preparing to never see him again, and not a second preparing for this. Her heart was pounding so loud it drowned out the soft jazz pouring from the ballroom speakers. She turned toward the buffet, pretending to rearrange the shrimp cocktails, but her gaze slipped again. Just a glance, just long enough to prove to herself he was real. There he was, shoulders square, laughter polite, hand wrapped around a glass he hadn't sipped from. And all she could think was, he doesn't know. He has no idea that the boy asleep upstairs in the staff room has his eyes. Matteo brushed past her from the kitchen, a tray of tarts in his hands. "You're pale," he murmured under his breath. "Want me to cover your next round?" Elena forced a smile, the kind that cracked around the edges. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said gently, but didn't push. Matteo never did. He was the only one who knew that her son, Eli, The bright-eyed 4-year-old with a laugh that could melt stone was the reason she stayed in this town. The reason she wore a name tag and cleared crystal dishes for people who barely noticed her. Julian had been different. Once, back when he was just a man with big dreams and a crooked grin. Before Geneva, before silence, before everything changed. She remembered the last message she sent him. "Call me, please. It's important." He never did. And so she'd gone on alone, grown her courage in the quiet, learned to live without the man who never returned. Until now, Elena finished her pass along the buffet and made her way toward the hallway. She just needed a moment, a breath, a place where his cologne didn't drift between the guests. But as she turned the corner, a ripple of applause stopped her in her tracks. They were toasting him. Julian, the man who'd walked out of her life without knowing what he'd left behind. She looked up. For a second, less than a second, his gaze moved across the room and paused. Right on her, the tray almost slipped from her hands. Did he recognize her? Did 5 years change her too much, or not enough? Their eyes held for a breath, just a breath. Then someone stepped between them, a waiter, a donor, a distraction, and he looked away. Elena let out the breath she didn't realize she was holding. She turned, walked quickly toward the kitchen doors, and whispered to herself, "Just make it through tonight. He's not yours anymore." But her hands were still shaking. And upstairs, the boy with his same eyes was fast asleep. Chapter 2. The boy upstairs. The snow kept falling. Outside the tall ballroom windows, it coated the mountain ridge in white velvet. Inside, the heat of conversation, perfume, and polished ambition pulsed like a second heartbeat beneath the music. Elena slipped into the back hallway, leaning against the cool plaster wall behind the kitchen. Her hands still trembled, not from the cold, not even from nerves, from memory, from the past. Standing 30 feet away in a tuxedo, she pulled her phone from her apron and opened the one folder she never let anyone see. Eli, first photo. Eli at 2, wrapped in a dinosaur towel, grinning with peanut butter on his cheek. Next, Eli last Halloween, holding her hand in a homemade astronaut suit. Then the one she'd taken just this morning, still half asleep, holding his stuffed raccoon under one arm. The mountain sunrise lighting his little face. She brushed her thumb across the screen like it could comfort her. "He doesn't know his dad is downstairs," she whispered. "And his dad doesn't know he exists." She blinked fast. No tears. "Not tonight. Mommy has to work," she'd told him gently hours earlier. "But you'll be with Miss Lisa, and there's hot chocolate." Remember, he'd nodded. He always nodded. He was the kind of child who trusted too easily, who believed everyone kept their promises. And maybe that was what scared her most, that Julian didn't, that he hadn't. She was 19 when she met him, waiting tables at a corporate lunch. He was 23, fresh out of grad school, pitching investors like his dreams were already real. He'd ordered black coffee and tipped her $50 on a check that barely cracked 20. That night, he found her again in the parking lot. "You want to know the real reason I tipped you?" he asked, with a crooked grin. She crossed her arms. "You felt rich." "No, because you looked like you needed someone to see you." She remembered thinking, "God help me, this man's going to ruin me." And she wasn't wrong. But before he disappeared, before Geneva, before she stood shaking in a hallway trying to breathe, there had been something real, something soft. When she found out she was pregnant, she didn't cry, not at first. She dialed him over and over, sent emails, messages, letters, one voicemail, trembling and long. Nothing. He'd vanished into the dream, and she had a new reality growing inside her. A door opened behind her, and Matteo stepped through, holding a tray of powdered beignets. "I saw you leave," he said. "Thought you might need a second." "I'm fine." She lied again. "You always say that when you're lying." She tried to smile. It didn't land. "You think he remembers me?" she asked softly. Matteo didn't answer right away. He balanced the tray on a service cart and leaned against the wall beside her. I think some men remember only when it serves them, but I think Julian remembers when it hurts. She looked up. And what about Eli? Matteo exhaled, his expression folding. Elena, he deserves to know, and so does your son. She swallowed hard. Her voice cracked like glass. I don't know if I can survive him walking away again. From down the corridor, someone called her name. She straightened. Back to the ballroom, back to the tray, back to pretending the most important man in her son's life didn't just breathe the same air. But before she turned, Matteo touched her sleeve gently. You are not the girl he left, he said. No, she whispered. I'm the woman who raised his child without him. And with that, she walked away, toward the chandeliers, toward the noise, and completely unaware that Eli was stirring awake upstairs, small feet about to find big steps. Chapter 3. The Word That Broke the Room. The ballroom was humming when she stepped back in. Music, murmurs, clinking glasses, the choreography of people pretending they weren't watching each other. Elena kept her eyes low, tray high, spine straight. She could still feel the weight of his gaze from earlier. Had it been a flicker of recognition, or just polite curiosity from a man who'd long forgotten the waitress he once kissed behind an airport parking lot? She didn't want to know. At table 12, someone spilled champagne. Elena offered a napkin, bowed her head, cleared the glass. Her fingers moved automatically. She'd perfected this, being invisible, in plain sight, across the room. Julian stood near the east window, surrounded by venture capitalists and brand executives. His smile was all surface now, polished, practiced, but underneath, his mind wandered. Something about the woman by the buffet. The way her eyes widened when she saw him, the way she vanished, it stirred something, not memory. Exactly. Something deeper and knowing. A tug, like a dream you're sure you've lived through. She placed her tray down, turned to leave. But then, a shift in the room. Not loud, just strange. People's heads turned. She followed their gaze instinctively, and her heart stopped. He was small, curly-haired, in little navy trousers and a too-big sweater. Ellie, somehow, he'd slipped away from the staff room. He stood on the ballroom floor, blinking against the lights and faces. And then he saw Julian, and everything tilted. Daddy, the little boy called out, voice high and hopeful. His legs moved faster than his thoughts. He ran straight toward the man Elena had spent 5 years avoiding, straight into the eye of the storm. The room fell silent. Time did a strange thing, folding in half. Julian looked down, stunned. A small boy had just wrapped himself around his leg and called him Daddy. Julian's hand hovered, frozen in air. He looked up, eyes scanning, searching, and found hers. Elena stood rooted near the dessert station, her face drained of color. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. The music kept playing, faintly, like it hadn't realized what had just happened. Julian looked from the boy to Elena and back again, and though no one said a word, the entire room felt the fracture. A guest laughed nervously. A waiter dropped a fork. Ellie, still smiling, looked up at Julian. You came back, he said sweetly. I knew you would. Elena rushed forward then, heart in her throat, legs barely working. She scooped Eli into her arms, whispering into his curls, Sweetheart. No, he's not. But the words collapsed because her voice broke and her eyes betrayed her. Julian took a slow step forward. Who is he? He asked quietly. Elena's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She turned and walked away, the boy in her arms, the room behind her, spinning, and the man she once loved staring after them, like he'd just woken from a life he didn't know he'd been sleeping through. What do you say when the truth finally finds its voice? In the Mouth of a Child, Chapter 4, What He Saw in Her Eyes. Elena didn't stop until she reached the hallway behind the staff kitchen. Breath ragged, arms wrapped tightly around her son, Eli was still smiling, still unaware that he had just cracked open a truth she'd buried beneath 5 long winters. "You called him Daddy, sweetheart," she whispered gently. "Do you know who that man was?" He shook his head against her shoulder. "I don't know. He just felt like someone I missed." The answer broke her a little, not because it was wrong, but because somehow it was right. In the ballroom, Julian was no longer smiling. The crowd around him blurred, became noise. He handed off his glass without a word, walked toward the back, past curious glances, past the swirl of conversation that now felt like fog. He wasn't sure why his hands were shaking. Maybe it was the boy's face, or the voice that called him Daddy, or maybe it was Elena. The way her eyes widened when their son ran toward him. He'd seen that look once before. The night he left, the door to the staff corridor swung open with a hush of cold air. Elena stood just a few steps away, trying to settle Eli back into Lisa's arms. Julian didn't speak, didn't ask questions yet. He just looked at the child, at her, at all the years that lived between them, like ghosts in the space they didn't touch. Elena turned, and their eyes locked again. It wasn't anger in his gaze, not yet. It was disbelief, and under that, something that looked an awful lot like grief. "I tried," she whispered, voice barely audible over the clatter of plates behind the kitchen door. Julian stepped closer, careful, as if he might break something. "Is he?" He paused. "Elena, is he mine?" She couldn't lie. "Not anymore?" "Yes." A long silence hung between them. Not sharp, not cruel, just heavy. Julian looked past her, toward the hallway where Eli had disappeared. "How old is he?" "4," she said. "Almost 5. His mouth pressed into a line. "That lines up." She nodded, then added quietly, "He's bright. Loves puzzles. Thinks every cloud looks like a dragon." Julian gave a soft, breathless laugh, the kind that hurt on the way out. "I missed it all," he murmured. "Didn't I?" "You missed a lot," she said, "but not everything. He's still small. He's still open." Julian's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "I would have stayed," he said. "If I'd known." "I know," she said, and she meant it. But meaning it didn't undo what had been lost. Behind them, a curious guest stepped into the hall, but Julian turned, shielding Elena with his body. This moment, whatever it was no one else's. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, softly now. No accusation, just ache. "I tried," she said again. "You were gone. Every number disconnected. I thought you moved on. And by the time I knew, it was too late to say it without sounding like a trap." She looked down, ashamed of how long she'd stayed silent. "I raised him alone." "Julian, I did the best I could." He nodded slowly. "You did more than that. I could see it in the way he looked at you. He's whole." Her breath hitched, because that was all she'd ever prayed for. A new voice interrupted Mateo, appearing like a quiet storm, his eyes flicking between them. "Reporters are circling," he warned. "One already asked if the boy's yours." Julian's jaw tightened. Elena felt her chest seize. "We need to be careful," Mateo said. "The moment's fragile." And it was so fragile. A story that had waited 5 years on the tip of her tongue was now in the hands of the press. As Julian looked at her one last time before turning back toward the ballroom, his voice lowered. "I don't know what comes next, but I'm not walking away this time." Elena didn't answer, but her silence for once felt like hope. "He didn't say I forgive you. He didn't have to. Sometimes love doesn't return as fireworks, but as the quiet decision to stay." Chapter 5. The leak. Elena had only just made it back to the staff hallway when the whispers began, first from the pastry girl, then the coat check boy, then Lisa, pale-faced, holding up her phone with trembling fingers. "There's a photo," she said softly. "It's spreading." Elena stared at the screen. A grainy image, Eli's tiny arms, wrapped around Julian's leg. Her face blurred in the background, but not enough. The caption was already cruel. "Billionaire Julian West's secret child, winter gala, mystery, sparks, rumors," and beneath it comments, hundreds, speculation, assumptions, lies tangled with guesses. Elena pressed her hand to her mouth. Her son, exposed to the world in a moment that wasn't meant to be seen. Not like this. Julian's voice broke into the panic behind her. "Where is it?" he asked Matteo. His tone was calm, but his eyes burned. Matteo showed him the post. Julian scanned it. His jaw flexed once, then again. He closed the phone slowly, like he was holding something about to break. This wasn't supposed to happen tonight. Elena whispered. Julian turned to her. "No," he said, "but it was always going to happen someday." They moved to a private corner near the stairwell, away from curious glances and champagne-sweet gossip. "I can fix this," Julian said, more to himself than to her. "My PR team will spin it. I can—" "No," Elena interrupted. Her voice was steady now. "Don't make him a spin. Don't make me one either." Julian looked at her, eyes searching. "I'm not trying to hide him," he said. "But will you own him?" she asked. He blinked. "He's not a press statement, Julian. He's not a paragraph in your damage control plan. He's a boy. He thinks you're a mystery and a hero and a dream he's not sure he's allowed to have." Her voice cracked. "And now the world gets to decide who he is before he even understands it himself." Julian stepped back. The tension in his shoulders collapsed. He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't ask for this." "No," she said, but he didn't ask to be hidden either. The silence stretched, and then a softer voice joined them. Eli, tiny, sleepy-eyed, standing barefoot in the hallway, clutching his raccoon plushie. He rubbed his eyes and blinked at them both. "Mommy," he asked. "Is he mad?" Elena knelt, heart in her throat. "No, baby, no one's mad." Julian lowered to one knee, slowly, like he didn't trust his legs. He looked at Eli. Really looked. Those green eyes, that stubborn chin, the soft way he blinked when he was confused. Julian's voice came out barely above a whisper. "You have my eyes." Eli tilted his head. "Do I?" Julian smiled. "A real one this time." "Yeah, kid, you do." Elena watched them, breath caught. No stage, no public, just the man who left, and the boy who needed him, and a mother. Learning what forgiveness might look like. From the main hall, a crash, then laughter. A waiter had dropped a tray. Or maybe the weight of rumor was tipping everything sideways. Matteo reappeared, grim. "There's more," he said. "A journalist." He's trying to confirm Eli's name. "Some investors feeding him stories." Julian stood. "Then I'll talk to them. They'll twist your words," Elena warned. "Then I'll give them nothing to twist," he replied. She looked at him. Really looked, and realized this man wasn't trying to save his image. He was trying to save something far more fragile. "Let me come with you," she said. Julian's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You sure?" "I'm not hiding anymore," she said. "Not from you. Not from this." He held her gaze for one long second, then nodded, and together, for the first time, they walked into the fire. Side by side. Some truths are too fragile to be spoken out loud until the moment comes when not speaking them would be a greater betrayal than the past ever was. Chapter 6. The Choice. The ballroom was louder now, not from the music, but from something unspoken, a tension in the air, rising like a storm just beyond the glass windows. Some guests still laughed, some stared, and some had already refreshed the post with Julian's name in it. He knew the world too well. A whisper becomes wildfire when paired with a photo and the word scandal. Julian stood near the back corridor with Elena at his side. Eli had been safely tucked into the manager's lounge, under Lisa's watchful care. He was drawing spaceships, unaware his world was unraveling just outside the door. Julian turned toward Elena. "I can walk out there and deny it," he said. "Say the photo was misleading. Say the kid isn't mine." Elena blinked slow. "That's what you want." "No," he said immediately. "But it's what they expect. If I admit it, they'll dig. If I lie, they'll destroy us." She looked away. Her voice came out low. "There's no safe path, Julian. You either protect the image or protect the boy." That stopped him, right in his chest, because he knew the answer. He'd always known it. Matteo approached quietly, holding a phone. "It's spreading fast. You've got 10 minutes before this turns into a press frenzy." Julian looked down at the phone, at the comments, the hashtags, the speculation, and he suddenly hated all of it. "He deserves better," Julian murmured. "Not a headline, not a guessing game." Elena crossed her arms over her chest. "Then give him a name," she whispered. He turned. "What?" "Don't let them decide who he is. You do it. You say it." Before they do, Julian's chest rose slowly. She was right. If he let the press shape the narrative, Eli would never have a clean start. But if he said it first, if he stood before the crowd and claimed his son, not with shame, but pride, then maybe the storm would still come. But they'd meet it together. "I'll tell them," he said, voice clear now. "Tonight, all of it." Elena stepped back, her hand trembling slightly. "You're sure?" He met her eyes. "I've been sure since the moment he called me daddy." Minutes later, Julian walked onto the stage near the grand piano. Lights dimmed, just enough to make the chandeliers flicker like stars. The chatter dipped to silence. He looked out over the ballroom. Faces stared back, investors, reporters, friends, strangers, and somewhere near the far wall, Elena stood, not in uniform, not in shadow, just herself. Julian cleared his throat. No notes, no speech, only truth. Tonight was meant to celebrate generosity, but something unexpected happened. Something personal, something important. A beat. The kind of silence that makes or breaks a man. You saw a photo, and maybe you're wondering if it's real. So I'll tell you, yes, it's real. The boy in that photo is my son. Gasps, small ones, a flurry of blinking cameras. He continued, "I didn't know about him until tonight, and I have a lot to make up for. But I will not deny him. I will not protect my reputation at the cost of my child." His voice softened. "He is smart. He is kind. He loves rockets and bedtime stories. And I'm proud to be his father." From the back of the room, Elena felt her knees give the slightest bend, not from weakness, but from release. She had carried that secret for years, and now it was weightless. Julian looked down, then back up. "I don't know what the tabloids will say tomorrow, but tonight, I'm not interested in silence. I'm interested in love, in truth, in showing my son what a real man does." When faced with fear, the applause came like a wave, soft at first, then stronger. A few stood, then more. And soon, the whole room. Elena blinked hard, watching from the shadows. She didn't cry, but if she had, it would have been the sound of a wall collapsing inside her. In the lounge upstairs, Eli pressed his face against the TV screen, where the ballroom broadcast played on mute. Lisa gently wrapped an arm around him as he pointed. "That's him," he whispered. "That's my daddy." Sometimes love is loud, and sometimes it's just a man choosing truth, even when it costs him everything else. Chapter 7. The morning after. The storm passed sometime before dawn. Snow piled quietly on windowsills. The last champagne flute had been cleared. The chandeliers dimmed one by one, and the truth Once a secret, now floated free in the cold, clean air. Julian didn't sleep. He sat by the window of the staff lounge, elbows on his knees, a paper cup of coffee going cold in his hands. Somewhere in the next room, Eli was snoring softly, curled up beneath a thick hotel blanket, his little raccoon plush tucked under his chin. Julian had watched him for hours, not because he didn't trust the boy to stay asleep, but because he couldn't stop seeing himself. In that face, in that brow, in the way his feet kicked the blanket off every 10 minutes. He looks like me, Julian thought. God help me. He looks like me. Behind him, the door opened. Elena stepped inside, coat folded over one arm, her hair still damp from the snow outside. Her eyes were tired, her expression unreadable. She didn't speak at first. Neither did he. They just watched the same boy sleep and let the silence wrap around them like something sacred. Finally, Julian said, "He dreams with his hands." Elena tilted her head. Julian smiled faintly. "I watched him. When he sleeps, his fingers twitch, like he's building something in the dark." She nodded. "He builds paper bridges all over the apartment. He doesn't care if they fall, just builds them again." Julian exhaled softly, his voice edged with awe. "He's better than I deserved." Elena sat beside him, not close, but not distant. "You don't have to earn him," she said. "Just show up." The sun rose slow, throwing long golden streaks across the tile floor. The quiet felt different now, not heavy, not broken, but waiting. Julian looked down at his hands. They were calloused in all the wrong ways, built for deals, not for bedtime. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" he asked. Elena studied him. For what? For not being there. For missing his first step, his first word. For leaving when I didn't even know I was supposed to stay. Her voice was gentle. "He doesn't need you to erase the past, just not to repeat it." A pause. Then, "What about you?" he asked. She blinked. "What about me? Can you forgive me?" Elena didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, eyes following the slow drift of snow. Then she said, "I forgave you. The first time he smiled at me with your mouth." They sat in the hush of that moment, and it wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Later, Eli woke, rubbing his eyes. Julian walked over, knelt beside the couch. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You hungry?" Eli nodded. "Can we get pancakes?" the boy asked. Julian grinned. "I think we can do that." He looked up at Elena. She smiled, barely, and this time, she didn't stop him from taking his son's hand. Not all reconciliations happen with fireworks. Some arrive in whispers, over pancakes and paper bridges. Chapter 8. Pancakes and Promises. The diner was nearly empty, a quiet spot on the edge of town, where the smell of syrup clung to the walls, and the waitress knew everyone by name. The kind of place where scandal didn't follow you not right away. At least, Eli sat in a red vinyl booth, swinging his legs and coloring a rocket ship on a kid's menu with a stubby blue crayon. Julian sat across from him, still in yesterday's suit, tie loosened, eyes still red-rimmed from the longest night of his life. Elena sat beside Eli, stirring coffee with trembling fingers. It was quiet, soft, real, and Julian couldn't stop staring at the boy. "Do you always draw rockets?" he asked gently. Eli grinned. "Sometimes castles, but rockets go higher." Julian smiled at that. "You like building things." Eli nodded, flipping the menu. "I want to build a ship that can take people to Mars." Julian's heart clenched. "My son wants to take people to Mars, and I nearly missed it." The waitress came and went with pancakes. Julian cut Eli's into tiny triangles. Out of instinct, more than experience, he hesitated, watching Elena for a cue. She just nodded, quietly surprised. Maybe fatherhood wasn't something he had to be trained for. Maybe it had always been there, under the surface. Halfway through breakfast, Eli looked up and said, Are you staying? Julian's fork paused mid-air. Elena went still. Julian lowered the utensil, leaned forward. Do you want me to? Eli considered. Mommy gets tired sometimes. She tries not to show it. But I see. Julian swallowed hard. I see too. He said softly, and I miss things. Eli continued, voice solemn for a child, like when other kids bring their dads to school night. Elena looked down. Her hand trembled. I didn't know, Julian whispered. Eli just shrugged. It's okay. You're here now, right? Julian reached across the table, not to Elena, not yet, but to Eli. He placed his palm on top of the boy's. Gently. I'm here now, and I'm staying, if you'll have me. Eli's smile came slow. You can come to school night. Julian smiled too. Deal. After breakfast, they walked to the car slow, unsure. Julian opened the back door, helped Eli into the seat, fumbled with the buckle. Elena watched in silence. He didn't ask her to help, and maybe that mattered more than anything else. On the ride back to the hotel, Eli slept, Julian drove. Elena sat beside him, hands in her lap. Snow whispered against the windshield. And then, out of nowhere, she said, What are we, Julian? He didn't look away from the road, but he answered without hesitation. We're parents. She nodded, and beyond that, he glanced over, just for a second, then quietly said, That depends on if you still believe in second chances. They didn't speak for the rest of the drive, but the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was hope, unfolding. Sometimes, healing isn't a grand gesture. It's a man cutting pancakes and learning how to fasten a seatbelt for the son he almost never knew. Chapter 9. The Fire and the Frame. By mid-morning, the hotel had quieted. The press had cleared for now. The investor, who once threatened to expose them, had gone silent, likely warned off by Julian's legal team. But even with the chaos retreating, one thing hadn't changed. Everyone knew. The staff whispered, guests stole glances, and wherever Elena walked, she felt it. That old shame clinging to the hem of her uniform. She stood in the hallway outside the ballroom, staring at the polished floor that just last night had echoed with applause and judgment. Julian approached, slow and careful, a paper cup in each hand. Hot cocoa, he said. Extra marshmallows. Eli's influence. She accepted it with a nod. Her fingers brushed his. They both noticed. For a long moment, they just stood there, the hotel quiet around them. And then, Julian said, I'm not letting them turn you into gossip. She raised an eyebrow. They're already trying, she said. I heard someone call me your mistake. His jaw flexed. You're not my mistake. No, he repeated, voice firm. You're the reason I still believe in anything real. Her breath caught. She didn't want to cry. Not in the hallway, not in this uniform. But his words, they broke something open. I almost didn't tell you, she admitted. Even when I saw you that first night, I told myself it wasn't the right time, that I didn't want to ruin your life. Julian shook his head. You didn't ruin anything. You gave me a son. You left. Julian, I know, he said quietly. And I've been living with the echo of that every day since. They stood in silence. And then soft as snow landing on glass, he said, Can I show you something? He led her through a side hallway, up a service stairwell, into one of the hotel's private suites. Inside, a fire was already lit. Warm light danced across dark wood floors. And on the center table, a photo frame. Simple, silver. Inside it, a printout of the now infamous photo. Eli wrapped around Julian's leg, smiling. I had it framed, he said. She stared at it. You're not ashamed, she asked. Julian looked at her, eyes soft. No, I'm claiming him. And you? In every room I walk into. Elena let out a slow, shaky breath. And when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away this time. I want to build something real, he said. No boardrooms, no secrets, just us. Elena looked at the photo again. Her son, the man she once lost, and a moment frozen in time, now reframed as something worth keeping. Love doesn't always arrive in grand confessions. Sometimes it's just a picture on a table saying, "This is mine. I won't run from it anymore." Chapter 10. The Quietest Yes. A week passed, not with thunder, but with soft steps. The world moved on, or at least stopped staring. The news cycle had shifted, the headlines faded, but inside a quiet apartment on the edge of the city, life had just begun again. Julian stood at the door, holding a brown paper bag of groceries in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. He knocked. Eli opened it. "Hi." The boy beamed, all gap-toothed grin and morning cereal breath. Julian knelt, ruffled his hair. "Morning, Rocket Man. Did you bring the marshmallows?" Julian held up the bag and whipped cream. "We're going all in." Inside, Elena stood barefoot in a t-shirt, wiping the counter with a dish towel. She looked up as Julian entered. No makeup, no pretense, just her. And somehow, she'd never looked stronger. They moved quietly through the small kitchen. Him putting away groceries, her rinsing mugs. Not a single word had been said yet. And still, something in the silence hummed with certainty. Finally, Julian placed the folded paper on the table. Elena looked at it. Her name was on the envelope. She opened it. Inside, a letter, his handwriting, slightly slanted, all heart. "Elena, you once told me you didn't want to be a headline. You wanted to be a person, a mother, a woman who mattered even when no one was watching. You already are. I came back because of Eli, but I stayed because of you. And if you'll have me not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for mornings like this, I'd like to stay. Not as the man who left, but the man who will never leave again." She read it twice, then once more. When she looked up, her eyes were full, not of fear, but of knowing. Julian stood across the table, waiting, not begging, not demanding, just hoping. Elena stepped around the table, placed her hand flat against his chest, right where the letter would have rested had it been tucked into a suit jacket. And she said it without ceremony, without music, without a single ounce of the pain that once held her hostage. Yes, he didn't speak. He just pulled her close, wrapped her in a warmth she hadn't trusted in years. And when Eli peeked around the corner, clutching his raccoon plush, Elena whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's staying for dinner." The boy's face lit up, and the three of them stood there in a tiny kitchen, with burnt toast on the counter and marshmallows melting in cocoa, and something whole finally taking shape. Later that night, Julian tucked Eli into bed. He told a story about a rocket that got lost, then found its way home because it followed a light only it could see. And when the boy drifted off, Julian stood by the door, watching him. Elena joined him in the hallway. "I think we're going to be okay," she said. Julian took her hand. "I don't want okay," he whispered. "I want forever." In the end, it wasn't scandal that defined them, not class, not past, but the quiet decision to love anyway. Through the doubt, through the years, and through the winter, into spring. The closing reflection. Sometimes, the most beautiful love stories aren't the loudest. They don't explode. They unfold like snow melting quietly on a window pane. Like a child whispering daddy to a man who didn't even know he was missing that word. This wasn't a story about a perfect couple or a fairy tale ending with fireworks. It was about a man, a billionaire CEO, who had everything except the one thing that mattered. A family he didn't know he'd already lost, and a woman not famous, not powerful, but strong enough to raise a child on her own and still believe in love. When love came back, it was about a little boy with green eyes who built paper bridges out of hope. and somehow taught two broken hearts how to meet again in the middle. They didn't fix everything. They didn't need to. They just chose to stay. And sometimes that's everything. If this story moved you, if you believe that love, even when it's late, can still be real, then stay with us. Because the next story goes even deeper, and the heart always has more room to heal. Tell us in the comments, have you ever been given a second chance and dared to say yes? We'll be reading every word. Until then, take care of your heart, and remember, you are never too far gone to come home. See you in the next story.